Good morning. Welcome to Truth to Tell. I'm Andy Driscoll. Michelle is, well, I think she's in the air coming back from Seattle from a little conference in the business. And we're delighted to have you all with us today. We're diving into what might be an even hotter subject than we thought was true a couple of weeks ago when we thought about this issue of how xenophobic about Islam and Muslims many Minnesotans and Americans have become since 9/11 raids on the New York World Trade Center in 2001. Well, it turns out that the timing of both the Islamic calendar and a series of incidents overseas in the last days of Ramadan, Islam's holy month, give our topic more currency. Because, as we have seen so often in mainstream and not so mainstream media, we are sure to hear and see perhaps even more demonstrations of how fear can govern and expand to oppressive levels, with every report of presumed acts of terrorism or terroristic threats and the overreaction that often accompanies them. Sunday, it was said on the talk shows, was Laylat al-Qadr. Is that how you pronounce it? Oh, it's close enough, I guess. The night of power. Of course, we were led to believe then that the prison breaks in 4 Islamic or partially Islamic countries was some sort of demonstration of power. And in partial response to that, and a mess of other information, all classified, of course, led to the shutdown of embassies across North Africa, on the Arabian Peninsula, as well as other nations where the breaks took place in light of a, quote, credible terroristic threat. Whatever that means. Add it all up and it's clear we've been infused with yet more fear of Islamic peoples. We need only to watch and hear and read the viral messages vented by hate-mongering, faceless people, or the very prominent personalities of entities like Fox News, to see how profitable it has become to trade for great profit on the xenophobia and paranoia generated by the reporting and wild accusations leveled by these outlets. Now, this latest foray into global panic and closing the diplomatic missions of several Western nations in response to some sort of danger we can't even know about. Of course, I suggest that the more we know, the less likely anything could ever happen, but you'll never get that security industries and agencies to concede that point. This brings us to Minnesota and the local battles our religious friends in Islam have been forced to fight to open mosques, schools, activity centers, much like other local battles for similar facilities in New York and Tennessee over these last few years since 9/11, and the many years of death and imprisonment and torture inflicted on civilians and suspected combatants, not to mention the drone strikes that take out large groups of innocent women and children in the mortal pursuit of presumed terrorists. Of course, even American citizens who are shot down without trial. Of course, Islamic peoples in the United States come from every corner of the world and from every ethnic enclave within each of them. And the fears are all unfounded nonsense, but there is danger in such opposition if the paranoia carries over into violence. Here at home, proponents of proposed Islamic centers and schools clash head-on with terrified future neighbors, fearing everything from thievery, to radical teachings and terrorism right down the street, to murder in the middle of the night. Well, today's guests have faced these specific encounters with residents in a variety of settings. One of the last in the City of Blaine, which we'll hear about. And by the way, they won that case. It's their job to protect proponents as well as to bring calm to panicked neighborhoods. So today, we spend the hour talking with just a few of our Islamic friends as Ramadan winds down at sunset Wednesday, sparking 3-day celebration to break the fast. Is that what do you call those 3 days?
Eid. It's called Eid al-Fitr.
Eid al-Fitr. Okay. We'll get it down here. Let's meet them now in any event. And we're missing one, so we're not sure where he is, so I hope he appears any moment now. In any event, Asma Lori Soroya is Executive Director of the Minnesota chapter of the Center for American Islamic Relations, or CARE. Ms. Soroya, glad to have you with us today.
Thanks for having me. Good morning.
Good morning. Makram El Amin is the Imam of Masjid An-Nur, or Mosque of the Light, in North Minneapolis. He joins us by telephone because he's not feeling very well. Welcome to you, Imam.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Glad you're here. We're expecting Samad Rafe, who heads up the Blaine-based HIFS. There it is. He's here. Oh, he's on the phone? Oh, well, he's on the phone too. Well, Samad Rafi is with us. He heads up the Hifz Quran School, Darul Arqam. Mr. Rafi, welcome to Truth to Tell.
Good morning, Andy.
I'm glad you're with us.
Thank you.
We were expecting you in the studio, and you're not here. So that's my fault, I guess. In any event, we're just delighted we have all three of you on hand here to talk about this. Remember, give us your questions and comments about the impact of these bigoted behaviors by giving us a call at 612-341-0980. That's 612-341-0980. Or you can tweet us at TTT Andy Driscoll, all one word. You can also post comments on TTT's Facebook page at facebook.com/truth-to-tell. Right there, okay. Okay, where to begin? Why don't we start with you, Mr. Roya? CARE has likely been on the front line of these issues for many years. First, let me say that, like Islamic countries across the globe, there surely cannot be a monolithic approach to the politics of followers of Islam here or anywhere else. Am I right about that?
Definitely, that's true.
Okay, well, so tell us a little bit about CARE,
Sure.
about some of the encounters you've had with both fearful white folk and, as I've witnessed on occasion, with some people in segments of your own community. Tell us about CARE.
Sure. Well, CARE stands for the Council on American Islamic Relations.
Oh, it's the council.
It's the
I
council.
said center, didn't I? I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
so there are 35 chapters all over the U.S., and the Minnesota chapter was founded in 2007. So we're actually one of the newest CARE chapters across the nation. And it's basically a civil rights and legal advocacy organization. And we function on an extremely basic premise. And that premise is that everyone deserves to be treated with respect and dignity. That's why we exist. That's what we function on. And the majority of the cases that we get do involve Muslims in Minnesota. And as you mentioned, it's an extremely diverse community. There are about 150,000 Muslims in the state of Minnesota. And Minnesota...
150,000 Muslims?
Yep, 100
Oh my gosh, we need to do something about this. Okay, no, go ahead. Please.
And nationally,
I think it's wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's an extremely diverse community. You know, we have Muslims that are from the Middle East, from Africa, from, right here in America, we have African American Muslims, South Asian Muslims. So you have these diverse communities that come together under one community called the Muslim community. So it's extremely diverse. And in Minnesota, we have a large Somali population. It actually makes up about 70% of our total Muslim community. So it's extremely our Somali in Minnesota.
Oh
so
my.
It's extremely a large part of our community.
And they've been encountering all kinds of different issues. And I should have brought a Somali onto the show. I didn't realize they made such a percentage of Muslims here. Imam Makram, you're not there. You're not a Somali, are you?
No, Andy, I'm an African-American Muslim.
Good.
But we do have a number of Somali individuals and families that frequent our mosque in Masjid an-Nur.
Outstanding. Okay. So let's just have a conversation about all this, because I do come from something of an ignorant background on Islam itself. But when I was reading up on Ramadan and the Quran, I was astounded at the similarities in the development of the Quran, for instance, as is in the Bible. Perhaps Imam Makram, you can tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, yes. I mean, I think that if there's a comparative study that is done between the various scriptures, I think that one would find many similarities in terms of some of the basic ideas that come forth, as well as for the idea of the various stories of the prophets, and maybe stories of Moses and Noah, and those well-known stories from Scripture also translate through the various scriptures as well. So it's another commonality that we all share. All looking to glean, guidance, wisdom, answers to questions, solutions to problems and dilemmas that we encounter on a day-to-day, year after year basis. But nonetheless, that is a definite similarity between our scriptures.
Yes, I was astonished at that, especially since in the development of the books of the Quran being very similar. And you teach the Quran, of course, Samad. Rafi, you teach the memorization of this material. Memorization, right?
That's correct. Just to give you a brief background on this, Andy, is that we not only teach how to memorize the Quran, but we also teach how to recite the Quran, which is also a very important part of our obligation. So Prophet Muhammad, when he actually came to this world, he did not have a book in his hand to preach. So he was revealed with inspiration by God on his hand. And when he recited this to his companions, they memorized it. And thereafter, the generations have memorized word by word. And you can think of this as about more than 400 pages. And this legacy has continued since last 1400 years, from generation to generation, memorizing word by word. Same the way it is in Africa, it is ditto in all over the world, in all over Middle East, in all over South Asia. So you take a copy of Quran in any part of the world, you won't find a different even in a word, how it is voweled, or how is it, even pronunciation is the same. So that's what the consistency we are talking about. So the amount of effort and amount of hard work that goes behind this is tremendous. I mean, you can just imagine more than 400 pages that the first that a person need to learn how to recite, then learn how to memorize it. There is a particular way they follow how to memorize it, which is amazing. And the more you learn about how it is memorized and how it is kept alive during a person's life, it's actually amazes me. I don't myself have memorized it, but I have seen people memorizing it, and the amount of time they give it to it just astonishes me.
Wait. You say you have not memorized the Quran?
I have not memorized it completely. I have a portion of the Quran memorized.
This is your school, buddy. Why don't you know what you have? No, I'm kidding. Okay, well now, what is interesting, doesn't Quran mean recitation or something like that? So it actually means recitation. It must mean that these are scriptures that should be recited over and again. But when you recite, you can sometimes read them. why memorize them?
So the idea behind is that this was carried away through memory from last 1400 years, and the book was written actually later after the demise of the prophet. So the tradition has been kept of saving that in the heart. So it is not dependent on technology. It's not dependent on the paper. It's not dependent on any physical mean, but just the human being itself.
Okay, it's sort of like other indigenous oral traditions. Is that the Quran?
And also it's important to point out that Muslims pray 5 times a day. And during those 5 prayers, they recite from memory from the Holy Book of Quran in Arabic. So that's why, it's extremely important for Muslims to have the Quran memorized.
Okay, so I noted that there's a call to prayer several times, but I kind of thought that maybe it was twice a day. Well, you say it's 5 times a day.
5 times a day throughout the day.
And talk a little bit about why is that, and where, in some cultures, breaking for prayer 5 times a day would seem to be a true interruption of your life's flow, workflow, and all that.
Well, the prayers are timed throughout the day. So there's an early morning prayer before sunrise, and then there's so they're pretty much spaced out during the day. And I think most Muslims will say that the prayer gives them a break from their everyday life. So it's kind of like, if anyone meditates or anything like that, it's just, taking a break from this world and focusing on, your inner self, focusing on God, and just really putting things into perspective.
How un-American. Imam Makram El-Amin, explain. So how do people come to your mosque to do this prayer each time, or can they do this from anywhere?
Well, the both answers to both of your questions is yes, and the masjid is available for all 5 prayers for those who choose to travel to come to pray in congregation or in the group. So yes, it's open for all the prayers throughout the day. But due to circumstances, maybe it's work or school or whatever the case may be for individuals, where they may not be able to physically come to the mosque itself, then they are able to pray pretty much wherever they are, as long as they have a clean, area that's with minimal distraction, and they're able to focus on what's being said, and a space that's suitable in terms of being, clean and sanitary, that sort of thing, allows them to pray pretty much wherever they are. So, it's not uncommon for a Muslim to pray in their workplace or somewhere, maybe if they're in school, or even in the park, out in the open. All these things have happened on various occasions.
Oh, has it?
Here in Minneapolis as well as across the country. So it's something that we, as Laura just mentioned, that it's a part of our daily life, our daily routine, something that is really ingrained into the life of the Muslims. So it's not something that we see as an intrusion, but actually an opportunity. I like the term, she said, like a break, or even an opportunity to even recharge myself, and therefore even be more productive in my day and in my life as I'm remembering my responsibility and my duty to God throughout my day.
Two things I want to say. First of all, those of you who would like to be watching our show, we are on livestream.com/truth-to-tell-men, or MN, all one word. And do tune us in if you like at that website. The other thing is that Imam El-Amin, you are Keith Ellison's imam, are you not?
Yes, Keith, the Congressman Ellison does frequent our mosque as a member of our congregation. So the answer to that is yes. So we're proud to have it.
Since you told me you're African American, and we have not met in person, so I did not know that. And are you a convert to Islam?
Actually, no. My parents converted to Islam through what's known as the Nation of Islam back in the 1950s. So they actually came into Islam prior to our birth, is where my parents actually met and married and so on and formed a family from that experience. And we have, so my siblings and myself actually were born into a Muslim household. So now with our children, now we're third, third and fourth generation now, indigenous Muslims, but we are not converts, but our parents were.
Well, that's really remarkable that there's a third generation African American practicing Islam, and now an imam, no less, which is a priest. Is it not like a priest is it like a rabbi or a priest? Is it not?
I would say it's very similar, very similar. However, in Islam, there is not a formal clergy like you would see in other faith traditions. In Islam, the imam is the leader, really the one who really leads prayer, and then formally the one who heads the congregation. But there's an equal opportunity in Islam when it comes to worship and the connectivity with the Creator, and it does not really take an imam to be for a person to access God or their Creator in that way. We serve a role and a function like anyone else in the congregation, though an important one, but nonetheless it's one that is more common, even though it has some distinction.
Well, well, that's very interesting, and now we could get to the political part about this a little bit too, because not only did the Darul Arqam school have trouble in Blaine, but of course African Americans who joined the Nation of Islam were pretty well vilified back in the days of Malcolm X, and who is today really, for a lot of progressives, a saint and a martyr. But talk about that. Do you have a sense of that history in your family of how your parents were brought into the Nation of Islam? Because there was a political dimension to all of that, was there not?
Sure there was. I mean, at that time, and in that movement, there was some real political reality in this country, particularly for African Americans, in terms of the treatment, or I would say even mistreatment, from just the society, from the laws in the society, government, and just the general sentiment of being the other. And I think that many of the struggles that we see even today are really not new things, but a repeating of history, as is true to many other things in history. They tend to repeat themselves. So the idea of profiling, of racial profiling, things of this nature, this is something that's really not new at all for African Americans. And then in African American Muslims, no less, is another layer of I would say difficulty at times in terms of being understood, but also trying to really express your faith tradition amidst all of these, or I would say maybe a barrage of difficulty relative to discrimination and mistreatment, civil rights violations, human rights violations, I would say as well. So yes, there was a real political reality that made the Nation of Islam very attractive to many African Americans. But I would say through the course of time, and as is true today, the majority of that movement has actually embraced Islam traditionally, in terms of being adherents to the Quran, being followers of Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam, peace be upon him, and joining with the global Muslim community or throughout the world, and being seen as a member of that family, so to speak.
Okay, so I want to give our listeners as well-rounded view of all this, but perhaps all three of you can talk a little bit about it, because I wondered about back in the 60s and 70s when the Nation of Islam was being made very prominent. There was a lot of anger floating around that movement. I recall it quite well, actually, and always was scratching my head about whether or not, but it was sort of a separatist movement, was it not? And it was based in Islam, sort of rooted in Islamic religion. Do you think that set a course for the way American xenophobia grew around this issue at the time? Perhaps you can start us off, Lori.
Sure. I think Imam Akram made a really good point that, that we're not the first community that's seen this. I don't think it started with the Nation of Islam. We've seen, the Jewish community go through this. We've seen Catholics and Italians and anyone who is new to America or is perceived to be new to America deals with these issues. And, so it's a cycle of initiation into American society that we see, unfortunately. And even at CARE Minnesota, we handled 180 cases last year just from the state of Minnesota. And not all of those cases come from Muslims. We also get cases from individuals who are perceived to be Muslim. So we get cases from Sikhs, Hindus, Arab Christians, also face discrimination. So I think, we do see this pattern that anyone that is perceived to be different, whether they're Muslim or not Muslim, is mistreated. They do face discrimination.
Now, can it be said that CARE is a little bit like the ACLU for the Islamic peoples around here? Is that it?
Definitely. I mean, we provide free legal services. We do case intake. So definitely.
Okay, we're going to take a break in a moment here, but when we come back, I'm going to want to explore some of the precise issues that occurred in, let's say, the city of Blaine, which is the most recent, yes, right, around the Darul Arqam school. So if you've just joined us, we're talking with what we're calling Islamophobia, which is American xenophobia directed at Islamic people here, especially since the 9/11 attacks back in 2001. Our guests are Center for it's not the Center, it's the Council on American Islamic Relations, for Minnesota, Executive Director Lori Soroya, Imam Makram El Amin of the Masjid An-Nur, or Mosque of the Light in North Minneapolis, and Samad Rafi, Executive Director of Darul Arqam, the Blaine-based Hifz Koran school, fascinating memorization school for the Koran. In any event, give us your questions and comments on the issues confronting Islam followers in Minnesota or elsewhere. Call us at 612-341-0980, 612-341-0980. Tweet us, TTT Andy Driscoll, or post your comments on Truth to Tell's Facebook page, Truth to Tell. That is facebook.com/Truth to Tell. And stick with us. We'll be right back. I'm going to get back to this important conversation about anti-Islamic paranoia around here. And it is really quite amazing what's been going on. I think what we'll do is we'll attack this issue. Lori was talking during the break about some issues that I think she wants to point up that, of course, there's never any one issue always going into place. But we'll get to the Blaine thing again. She lives in Blaine, for heaven's sake. I didn't know that. I wanted to ask, Samad Rafi, who's one of our guests and teaches up there. Samad, are you a native of Blaine, or do you live there?
I live in Blaine.
You do live in Blaine. Oh, so when you went before the city council, you could speak as a citizen, and that's very important. Okay. Well, you can talk about the Blaine situation, but why don't you talk about, in general, some of the civil rights work that you've been doing?
Well, the majority of the casework that we see in our office is actually employment discrimination. And, we talked a little bit about that earlier in the show. And so that can include a hostile work environment. We see cases of discrimination in hiring practices, retaliation issues, religious accommodation denials, things that are protected by the law, but the employer basically does not follow the law when dealing with their Muslim employee. So that's really the bulk of our work. And in those cases, we do provide free legal assistance to employees. We also see, unfortunately, a lot of cases around school issues where Muslim students are harassed and bullied in their schools because of their race, ethnicity, or national origin.
No, we really haven't touched a lot on that. Talk a little bit about that
Sure.
issue, because it must be occurring. Is it primarily in the suburban schools, or is it happening a lot right here in Minneapolis, St. Paul?
It's everywhere. Unfortunately, it's really, it happens everywhere. I think bullying happens everywhere, and we were just recently part of a coalition to pass the anti-bullying bill in Minnesota, and that's something that we're still working on. And we also settled, there was a federal settlement involving 2 school districts in Minnesota, the St. Cloud School District and the Owatonna School District, where these issues involved about 25 to 30 students in each school district. And there was really nothing that was being done to remedy these problems, and we had to get the Department of Education involved to come in and investigate and look at what was going on. And there was a settlement that was reached, so things are now a lot better for those students, and as well as other minority students.
Well, now, but what about the education of the children that have been harassing these young students? I mean, what are they getting a better sense of, let's say, even what Islam is, what Muslims are, who they are? Are they getting that kind?
Usually not. And so we don't actually, a lot of these cases do happen in places where there isn't a large Muslim population. So there really isn't a lot of interaction with Muslims. So we feel like that maybe contributes to it. They, if they have a neighbor who's Muslim, if they work with a Muslim, if they go to school with a Muslim, then they're more likely to not have that fear of who Muslims are. So we definitely see a correlation there, not just in the school, but in the workplace, in public, public venues, anywhere, where if there is that interaction with the Muslim community, then people are more friendly towards the Muslim community. They're less likely to fear them.
Let me tell you, as long as you're pursuing civil rights cases, and you guys, you can jump in anytime, okay? Talk anytime you want. This is a conversation here. But the civil rights machinery of Minneapolis and St. Paul and the state of Minnesota seems to have switched and shifted, and they don't seem as responsive as they used to be. I was on the Civil Rights Commission or Human Rights Commission of St. Paul for a while, and we really sort of tackled a number of issues there, and especially a lot of employment discrimination. If the executive director didn't do it, the commission did it. That doesn't seem to be happening a lot. Is that one of the reasons that CARE has to sort of jump in here?
Definitely. And we work both with the cities and as well as the state human rights department. We also file cases with federal agencies. So depending on the case, we will pursue the right venue. And we see a positive response. I think the school harassment case is a really good example where we worked with the school district for over a year to try to resolve these issues directly with them. And when that got us nowhere, we went to the federal government and they took the case, they investigated the case, and they created a 26-point settlement agreement that included providing diversity training for the teachers, giving cultural exposure to the students, and these things that the schools should have already been doing but weren't. So sometimes they need that extra assistance from the government to come in and do those things and incorporate those in their schools.
Samad Rafi, tell us a little bit about your experience up in Blaine. I know that all of you were sort of up there working on this, but and you have a Sally is your lawyer?
Yep, Sally Abdullah.
Yeah, Sally Abdullah. But you spoke up there, and I did see that YouTube piece, and we should tell people how they can get to the YouTube site to watch you guys in action up there. Well, talk about what you were encountering, would you please, Samad?
Yeah, sure. I would like to say that we were, when we went to a planning commission meeting in Blaine, we were not expecting and we were not prepared for opposition because we were there for last 6-7 months and there were no complaints from the neighbors where we are right now.
So you were blindsided a bit there, huh?
Yeah, we were completely blindsided. What happened? Why it happened? We were trying to just understand why there is so much opposition to it. When we went to planning commission meeting, there were 20 to 25 people who showed up, and they were upset. They were very upset that why we are coming to their area. So when we went there during the meeting, the concerns of the traffic were brought up. The concerns for parking were brought up, and but when I came out of the planning commission meeting outside the room, I tried to approach the neighbors, and the comments I got was truly hurted, because the first comment I got was that whoever you are not welcome in my neighborhood.
Right in your face, huh? Right in your face.
On my face. I'm trying to approach, and I'm trying to explain what we do, and I'm trying, because I was genuinely thinking that the people that does not know what we are doing, maybe that's the reason there is a fear of unknown, and there is a fear of who is this, and so I was trying to explain, what do I do? I'm part of your neighbor. I live in Blaine, and I'm part of you, basically, because we are part of the diverse culture here in the United States, and we live together. You might not know, but I go to the same shopping center that you go to. We go to the same barber, probably. Right. So that was the pretense that I was trying to approach and explain, but there were shocking comments like, why do you need to come here? Go somewhere else, and Islam is not welcome here, and that actually shocked me, and I was like, okay, we are three, and there are about our board of directors were there with me, and we are total three, and we were very, very surprised with the kind of opposition we got. So I started to think about this, because I know that the part of human being, innate desire of human being, is to learn and learn about different cultures, different religions. I went to a Catholic school in India, and I have my teachers who are Christian, and I have my friends who are not Muslims, and we are brought up in that kind of diverse environment. So the crossing there is no boundary for me to cross the line. So I was expecting the same from other side, but it was very difficult. And after planning commission meeting, before city council meeting, we actually we went door to door and invited neighbors for a dinner with us, and we gave out flyers, and we had our teachers to explain what we do here, what kind of environment we have here, how many kids we have here who's doing it, and why they're doing it. About 5-6 people showed up, and the people who showed up, they did not have concern for traffic or parking, but they couldn't understand why we are there. I mean, there was a rampant fear on what is going on. Why do you want to come here? And I think that was perplexing to me. How to explain this fear? Because once a person fears something, it's very hard to break that boundary, because that person is demonizing you in his mind without knowing you. Because this innate desire to learn is not there, and learn about different things is not there. So that's what I found in during this process.
I did get some reaction from one or two people that they said, well, of course, it's unconstitutional to teach religion in the schools. Well, now, wait a minute. They didn't get the fact that this is a private school, that it's actually supplementary to probably the public education that many young children are going to get. But, you know, it's funny how...
But Andy, I would add to this is...
Yes, Imam. Yes, Imam.
I would add in that this is just really pointing case of wherein lies the problem. You know, there's a situation where there was nothing that was being done that was unconstitutional or wrong, for that matter. It was a situation to where there was information being put out and you know, and you throw things out there really in general terms, you know, and to create an atmosphere as if something is going on wrong or something is to be feared. But when the dust settles and all the things are kind of put into place and everything's put into perspective, you know, that the fact of the matter is that nothing was wrong. These are citizens of the city of Blaine wanting to teach their children their faith tradition, as does any other faith tradition that they want to do. I'm a part of a lot of interfaith dialogue. I know that the study sessions, the Bible schools, and the Torah teaching sessions where their students, their kids are being taught and to reinforce their religious tradition, which is outstanding and which is what makes America America. But the idea when the Muslim community did that, and all things came into question at that point, and that's the irresponsibility I think that we're seeing and that we're hoping to combat. Really is to a group, whoever they may be, being able to hurl misinformation, create I mean, it's like being in a theater and someone yelling fire. You know, the idea, I mean, that's not okay.
That's not okay.
Not okay. Because you set a situation of panic and unrest when, I mean, and really that's a crime to do now. You know what I mean? And so the idea is that, I mean, just the same way of sensitivity that we have to keep the public safe, I think there should also be a level of responsibility on those giving out information to give out accurate information.
Yes.
And when it's found not to be true, then there should be, even if it's just a public demand for people to retract the things that they say. I mean, if someone just goes out and says, you know, they're over there, you know, teaching, you know, hate and that sort of thing,
and terrorism and all that jazz, yeah.
All of that, but when it all comes down to, no, they're teaching how to memorize the Quran, to be good individuals, be good persons, have strong families, all of these good things that we consider good virtue. And then, but then the response to this, I mean, there is no comeback to this. There is no way to come back and clean this idea up after you have just thrown this bombshell out into the public ethos of people, and now there's nothing else to really come behind that. I mean, that's the part that I think is very unsettling to Muslims. Of all groups that make up Muslims, we're all sensitive to this idea of having to defend a faceless and sometimes anonymous, you know, opponent that is not courageous enough to stand up and talk to us publicly about what their concern perhaps may be.
You know, go ahead, Samad.
Sure. And I think during the process, what I really appreciate was the stand of Blaine Planning Commission and also City Council, who actually realizes that this was a fear and this was nothing but a phobia or towards Muslims, and they understood it, and I think they did the right thing, and I would like to appreciate very much what they did, and we truly appreciate the Blaine Council and both the Planning Commission for taking steps in the right direction.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Andy.
I was just going to say how impressed I was with the mayor,
Yeah.
who gave a very nice little talk there when the vote was about to be taken.
Yeah, and we haven't seen this in other cities. I think that is important to point out, too, because this land use issue is happening all over Minnesota. We, just in the past 2 years, CARE of Minnesota has seen this happen in 4 other communities, so Blaine plus 4 more communities across the state, where communities wanted to, buy land for a mosque. They wanted to expand their center, build a school, and the neighborhood came out in opposition, just like they did in Blaine. And and I agree with Samad, that in Blaine, the city really took a strong stance in saying that, no, we are not going to allow bigotry and hate into our city. And they called the people out on it, and I think that was extremely impressive. And that I really wish and hope that that is what happens, that they have set this really strong precedent that when this happens in any other community, that the mayor, city council, planning commission is going to say the same thing, that, hey, you weren't here. This is one of the examples that one of the city councilwomen cited, was that there was a similar proposal that came to them just few, I think it's on the same street actually, just a couple houses over, there's a gas station. And they were building this gas station, you know, just 2 doors down from the mosque, or from the Hifz school. And so when this proposal came, there wasn't this opposition, even though that would bring more traffic, that would bring more noise. There's definitely more land use issues involved with the gas station, and no one showed up. Nobody cared enough to come. But then when this Muslim school comes, then, you know, 80 people sign a petition. So there, you know, there is that hypocrisy there, and they call them out on it. And that was extremely impressive and needed to be done.
Well, that's very impressive indeed. Now, Imam Al-Amin, I was very impressed by what you just said, because I think it's important that the public understand the accountability part of this, that we have an obligation, and public servants have an obligation to make it very clear that this is intolerable behavior, but it does seem that it's got to be balanced with attitude change. How do we change the attitude?
Yep. I just want to point out very, very important aspect here, Andy, is that what we see here is increasing of this hate crimes, and it's not especially towards the Muslims. And if you see overall, the hate crimes give you a measuring stick of what's going on in our city and in our state, and it gives a measuring stick like 180 cases last year. That's mind blowing to me. And that's huge. And whenever you come up with the idea of an Islamic center or a mosque, there is a huge opposition, and that tells us that there is a phobia, and there is a strong sense of phobia towards Muslim, and the trend is very, very concerning, very concerning. Overall, I was looking at statistics. Overall, hate crime statistics in the United States from 2000 to 2011. From 602 to 2018. That's huge. That's a huge number. That's
huge.
100% increase in hate crimes.
Did you say 600,000?
No, 602 hate crimes that increased to 2018.
Oh, I see. 602 that increased.
That's a big number. That's a big number.
And those are just the ones that are reported. There's others that don't even go reported.
Yeah, and the Department of Justice reports that 2 out of 3 hate crimes are not even reported. I mean, what you're seeing is just the tip of an iceberg, and this is very concerning. And the trend that's going on, we don't want a Milwaukee in here. We don't want Milwaukee in ours. What happened in Milwaukee, where the gunman randomly shoot at people.
That was really something, wasn't it? Yeah.
And we don't want a Joplin where the mosque was burned down in Missouri, and so this is concerning. And the people, I think that the right authorities should start taking a look at it to see what needs to be done, and what are the things. And we, as a Muslim community, we are willing to help out in whatever way we can. And people, I think we need to help people learn more about what is it that we have.
Excuse me, folks. I just, for some reason or other, I can't clear this throat here. Well, I think you're right, and it does seem like if you launch civil rights actions in concert with education, it does seem to. So, what are what's next up for you guys? At the legislature, what is CARE going to do now? Let's say, or what? You have civil rights actions going right now?
Well, we're still working with the anti-bullying coalition. Hoping to get that work. Also, we're involved in some of the immigration work that's taking place, the immigration bill. And also, I want to point out too, the issue of the mosque safety that was brought up. We're working with our local community. We have a new training called the Mosque Safety Training, where we go into Islamic centers and mosques and help them become more safe. And make sure they have the proper lighting, they have cameras installed, those kinds of things to ensure their safety. Not just mosques, but also any other minority churches or anyone that could possibly face similar issues. And I want to say too, the response that we get, we deal with these issues of hate crimes and discrimination and bias on a daily basis. And so people always ask me, how do you do this work? How do you not let it get you down? And my response is that, well, I look at the positives. Whenever there's, this group that organizes 80 people show up in Blaine, to oppose the center, there's 250 people that came to support it. And so that says a lot to me. We had a rabbi that came and spoke at the Blaine Planning Commission. And, so there is that interfaith network, the civil rights activists that do show up and tell us that we are here for you. We are here to support you.
Quickly, Imam, how about you? What do you have some next steps, and you and Samad?
Well, I would just say, we want to continue doing the works that we are, whether that's, the community outreach services that we are providing, the interfaith dialogue, and also just really inviting the public. We have an open invitation at Masjid an-Nur, as well as other mosques in the Twin Cities, for the public who are really interested in knowing who Muslims are, what Muslims are about, to visit us. They're welcome to come to Masjid an-Nur in Minneapolis, at whether it's our Friday prayer service or some other venue that we will look to create, that will give them an opportunity to not just read about what Muslims think or do, but also to be in our space with us and share our space with us as a means of better understanding. So we're all about that. We're all about being very open, very transparent. There's nothing hidden or secret in Islam that can't be shared in the public. So we maintain that position and have an open invitation to the public.
That's very kind of you. And Samad, anything about you very quickly, please? Very quick. Yep.
Yeah, we plan to open our education center for public, and we want to invite them, and we want to invite our neighbors and who had concerns or who have concerns to see actually what's in works, and how do we become part of the growing Blaine community, and that's something we want to do moving forward. Kind of our next steps.
That's great. I'm very sorry that we have to end it there. As Laurie was pointing out, it goes so fast. We will, by the way, all of the links to your various organizations are posted on our website, connected to your names on our announcement there. So if people want to get hold of you, they can do that. Thanks to our guests, Imam Makram El-Amin of Masjid an-Nur, or Mosque of the Light in North Minneapolis. Thank you very much, sir.
My pleasure to be with you.
Laurie Soroya is Executive Director of the Council on American Islamic Relations in Minnesota. Laurie, thanks very much for being here.
Thank you.
All right. And Samad Rafe is Executive Director of Darul Arqam, Hifz Koran School in Blaine. And thanks for joining us, Samad.
Thank you so much, Andy.
It's been great.
Thank you for having me.
Like all bigotry, Islamic xenophobia should be as intolerable as racism of any kind, but it will obviously take an effort from all of us to ensure that it stops dead in its tracks. Once more next week, we hear about the nurse practitioners of the dental profession, therapists, so don't miss it. Truth to Tell is a co-production of Civic Media Minnesota and KFAI. You'll find all the archives are up on our website, truthtotell.org. Thanks to our crew, engineer Kel Heil, videographer Craig Stelmacher, and Peter Hansen and Mark Kerner have all been here today. Back next week for another edition of Truth to Tell. Until then, I'm Andy Driscoll. Join us then. As always, please do take care of each other.